Hello everyone and welcome to the 12th and final game of the 2018 World Chess Championship match between Magnus Carlsen and Fabiano Caruana. If you are just tuning in to this channel or perhaps even to this match, then the previous 11 games have been drawn. The result is 5.5 to 5.5, and if we get another draw, then it will not be the final game. It will be the final in classical time format, but then we are going into the playoffs. We already mentioned how that works. So let's check it out. It's very interesting. Caruana has the white pieces. So basically, if you disregard the previous 11 games, Caruana just needs a win against Carlsen with the white pieces to become world champion. Sounds like a very easy task, but you know, you are playing against the world champion. And Carlsen, of course, he would like to win in classical time format, but then again, everyone in the world is of an opinion that the tie breaks will definitely go in his favor, as he's the favorite in, well, pretty much every time format, but especially in faster time controls. So before we check out the actual game, let's check a couple of photos. Again, compliments of Niki Riga. A link to her social links will be in the description below, so feel free to check out some of her other work. Now let's dig in. Here you can see a nice photo of Carlsen arriving, Caruana still not at the board, and you can see, next to how many lenses Carlsen has to walk just to get to his chair where he's about to start his game. And here we have Caruana. He arrives at the game. Against we have a semi-diagonal handshake. Still, you can see that the players are really trying not to have any eye contact whatsoever. You want to play against the position, not at all imagine that you're actually playing against a person. I guess that's the idea here. And we also have a very nice close-up of Carlsen. So far, at least not to my knowledge, Carlsen did not play the little joke, you know, push the pawn to c6 and only then push it all the way to c5 like Mikhail Tal did against Bobby Fischer the first time they met. But, you know, he might do it in some other tournament. And here we have a very nice photo of Caruana. Just showing it because it's a very nice photo. So there we have it. Let's check out this game. Again, we have a line that was already played a lot of times in this World Chess Championship match. Every game Caruana started with e4, so here he starts with e4 once again. And in the previous video I mentioned that 11 draws, this is the most that appeared so far in a World Chess Championship match, and then a lot of you said, yeah, but Kasparov versus Karpov had 17 draws, but that was in the older time format where the match could last indefinitely until one of the players scored 6.5 points. Here the match can only last for 12 classical games, so that format will not ever be broken, at least not until the rules are changed. But yes, of course, in that regard you are correct. The longest draw streak in a row is 17 draws in a match Kasparov-Karpov. But returning here, we have c5, the Sicilian defense by Carlsen, knight f3, knight c6, d4, exactly the same as was already played. Knight captures, knight f6, knight c3, e5. We have knight to b5, the Lasker variation of the Sicilian, d6 and knight to d5. Everything exactly the same as the players already played. Knight captures, pawn captures, and here is where Carlsen goes into a different line. Here, every time Carlsen went back with knight to b8, but here he goes knight to e7. It's a move that's played not as often, as knight b8 is the main line now, but still, of course, it is very playable. Caruana, of course, he's prepared for this move, as knight b8 and knight e7 are basically the only two moves that Carlsen has available here. He goes c4, improves the defense of the d5 pawn, and also if the knight has to retreat to c3, also you will already have c4 played. We have knight to g6 by Carlsen, and now comes queen to a4. Here we have bishop to d7 by Carlsen. Queen to d7 doesn't work, as knight to c7 immediately wins the game. You're in check, you cannot capture, the queen is pinned, and if you move the king, wherever you move the king, then a queen trade appears, and then you will lose the exchange after knight captures on a8. But after queen captures on a4, we have bishop to d7, and here we have queen to b4 by Caruana. We have bishop to f5, and now comes h4. By Carlsen, and h4 by Caruana. And this is a very interesting moment in the game. Here this game was already played. It was played in 2018 in the Batumi Chess Olympiad. Kramnik had this position against Roganovic, and in that game, Kramnik also played h4, and then a6 was played. And after a6, we had retreat. We had h5, and then after knight f4, knight c3, and in the end, Kramnik was able to win that game. But here, after h4, Carlsen prepared a new move, and that new move is h5, not allowing this pawn to advance to h5, and now Caruana has to make a choice. Here I will mention this, but after we see a couple of moves by Caruana, we will return to this position for a very specific reason. Here, Caruana actually played queen to a4. He wants to retreat. He wants to repeat a position here just to see perhaps if Carlsen is interested in repeating moves, but also to see if there's anything else to be played, but also perhaps to show that he, if he wanted to, he could make a draw here. Here, Carlsen simply repeats bishop to d7. We have queen to b4 and bishop retreats to f5. So here, Caruana definitely has to make a decision. If he retreats with queen to a4, it is very likely that Carlsen will retreat with bishop to d7, and we will have a draw by repetition. There's a lot at stake for this game. It's game 12. If they draw this game, of course they go into the playoffs, as we've already mentioned. But neither of the players really wants to lose this game, as then there's no chance to bounce back. You just lose, and whoever loses will again have to go through the candidate cycle to be able to challenge for the World Chess Championship title in 2 years' time. So here, Caruana, after thinking for some time, plays bishop to e3, and this was a surprise to everyone. And perhaps even to Carlsen, but Carlsen actually doesn't spend a lot of time here. Bishop to e3 is not one of the engine's top recommendations. The engine will give the repeating of the position with queen to a4, with the g3, and also with bishop to g5. But we're gonna mention bishop to g5 a little bit later, as it's really an important piece of evidence for this game. Bishop to e3 was played by Caruana, and here Carlsen spent a little bit of time, not too much, and he decided to go for a6. And he finds an excellent idea how to reach a position for which he was prepared, but through a different move order. We have knight to c3, and now comes queen to c7. This was a very nice move that you really had to be prepared for, as there are a lot of ideas to watch out for here, like bishop to b6, knight a4 to b6, knight a4 to bishop to b6. So if he plays the bishop here, then the queen can move, queen d7, and now it's not that big of a problem. If the queen was on d7 and rook on a8, then knight a4 would be troublesome if the knight could get to b6 in 2 moves. And on the other hand, after queen to c7, if you go immediately knight to a4, then black can simply go bishop to e7, and now knight to b6 will be met with rook to d8. Queen a4 check, and now you cannot block with the queen, of course, but you can simply move the king, and the king is very safe on f8. At some point, you will push e4 here, make the room for the knight. You will move the knight to e5. This rook can go h6, and you can bring the rook over into the game this way. Black will be all right here. So here, after queen to c7, Caruana decided not to do anything rash here. Rather, g3 was played. A very nice move that prepares to either develop the bishop differently, but more importantly, takes away the f4 square for the black knight. We have bishop to e7, and this is the position Carlsen had in mind. But just to show you why this position is so important, we will just go back to that moment where we mentioned that bishop to g5 was also a possibility. It's this moment here. After h5 was played, then Caruana went into this repeating of moves with queen a4 and bishop to e3. Bishop to g5 is the move that seems to be most promising here, but and of course f6 doesn't really work here. Bishop to e7 is possible, but again, white would be better here. The best line for black is, and it's actually there exists a game in this line that was played between Houdini and Stockfish, where queen to b8 was played here, and most likely Carlsen was trying to follow this game. But it's interesting here, after queen to b8, white doesn't really have a good way to continue. Again, white would have to play g3 at some point. a6 would be played. Knight would have retreated to c3, and after bishop to e7, bishop retreats to e3, you will have this exact same position that was actually reached in this game, but only via different move order. So returning back to that position, we said g3, queen, bishop to e7 is played now, and now Caruana decided to go for f3. And again, you can see that Carlsen is really prepared and that he was really following that Houdini stockfish line as he immediately blitzes out knight to f8. When I say blitzes out, I mean he responds in under a minute. We have knight to e4, making room for this bishop to come to d3, and now comes knight to d7. Here Carlsen has a very nice idea. He wants to bring this knight over to c5 at some point, and from there he will decide what to do. Bishop to d3 as played by Caruana. We have castles by Carlsen, and here Caruana could go for something like castles, but this would be perhaps a bit dangerous, because after rook 8 to c8, preparing b5, here you would have to waste a move. You would have to go king b1 to make room for the rook, and then after b5, yes, okay, now you can play rook to c1, but that's a lot of moves. So here Caruana finds a very interesting idea, rook to h2, and also I haven't really seen Kasparov say this, as I haven't been following that stream, but someone mentioned it on Twitter that Kasparov mentioned that this move was a lot of fun, so I just decided to share that as a quote above the board. And it's a lot of fun because it saves white a lot of time. Here, if we go into the same line, then white will be able to castle, and then this rook can come to c2 without this rook having to waste a move to come to c1 after this maneuver. But okay, Carlsen goes rook 8 to c8. Again, he prepares b5. We have queenside castle, and now Carlsen goes for a completely different idea. He goes bishop to g6. A very nice move. He prepares f5. Here, if you just try and rush it with b5, like we've mentioned, then this rook can immediately come to c2, and it already counters the queen-rook battery on the c file. After queen moves, pawn captures, and after you exchange here, king b1, and white is actually alright here. Black can't really push for much here. So, after queenside castle, we have bishop to g6, the strongest move recommended by Sese, and f5 is coming. So, rook to c2 by Caruana, and now Carlsen definitely does push f5. We have f5 here, knight to f2, and now comes knight to c5. And here you can already see that Carlsen's position is very strong. He has this extremely strong knight on c5. The bishops are very strong. This pawn is coming to e4 at some point. When that happens, this bishop will have this extremely strong diagonal f6 to a1, and after b5 comes and the position opens up, it will be a very, very strong position for black. Here Caruana plays f4. Everyone was expecting bishop captures on c5, as that knight is truly a tremendous piece here, but Caruana played f4, and here there's a lot of things to consider here. Carlsen said that he felt that he just had a very, very pleasant position here. He could just push without risking too much here, and he decided to play a5. It comes as an attack against Caruana's queen, and he has to decide what to do with the queen now. But there was a really fancy recommendation by Sese. I will just show it, even though it's a supercomputer line, but you know, just showing it perhaps. E captures on f4, G captures on f4, and now bishop captures on h4. So already grabbing a pawn, and now after bishop captures on c5, D captures on c5, attacking the queen. The queen has to defend the f4 pawn, so queen to d2, and now comes bishop to g3 with a double attack against the f4 pawn. Knight to h3, and now rook c to d8. We have king to b1, and now after h4, this is the position Sese had in mind, where this would be just cemented here. The knight would be stuck here, keeping an eye on the f4 pawn, and the black would just have a much better game here. But that's a supercomputer line, better not, you know, dwell too long about it. And but a lot of human grandmasters throughout Twitter and social networks recommended b5 immediately. And it does seem like a very nice choice. After bishop captures, pawn captures, queen moves, now it's a better position for black. Black does seem to be pushing, but it's not at all clear how do you immediately break through. If e4, bishop moves back, and it's I mean, if you capture, then white will be able to block the position. If you push through, then again everything will be blockaded. So it seems Carlsen wasn't satisfied with this, and Caruana in the press conference, I think he wasn't really he mentioned that he wasn't too worried about that. But okay, after f4 we have a5 by Carlsen, a different idea. b4 is coming at some point, but his idea, as he presented it in the press conference, was to push this pawn all the way, to push e4, and then this bishop from f6 and the pawn on a3 will be very powerful and create a lot of harmony. And okay, we have queen to d2, Caruana moves the queen. Of course, you cannot go queen b5. It seems like a very nice move, blockades everything, but then bishop to e8 traps the queen. So queen to d2 instead, and now e4. Carlsen pushes the bishop back, also creates a very nice diagonal for his own bishop. And now first he brings this bishop over to e8. And also a very important moment where bishop to a4 is a move that definitely you have to watch out for, as the rooks are set up the way they are. We have king to b1, and now comes a bishop to f6. Still not going for this bishop to a4, although you do have to always calculate if after b3 this knight can be sacrificed for the b3 pawn. We have rook to e1, getting the rook out of this very nasty diagonal, and now comes a move that Carlsen plays. He follows his plan. But again, we have this, I'm just going to show it because it's very nice, a nice line by Sese, that bishop to a4 was actually stronger, simply attacking the rook. And now after the rook moves, for example, rook to c1, you have b5. And after pawn captures, queen to b6. Already, it's only 3 moves, but this line with b5 and queen to b6, I don't see a human playing that, putting your queen in front of the bishop like this, but you're actually just going after the b5 pawn. And after bishop to d4, bishop captures on f6, g captures on f6, rook to c3. Now you will actually just exchange the bishop on e2, rook, queen captures, and now after knight to a4, you can see what immense pressure black has now on the king side. The rook is here. If the rooks get traded off, the other rook will join the attack as well, and the black's position is just much more active, and this is what Sese preferred. But okay, after rook to e1, a4, Carlsen wants to play a3 and then have this very nice connection here, and queen to b4. This is a move Carlsen mentions that he missed from Caruana, but I mean, most likely if he saw queen b4, he would have gone for bishop to a4 instead of a4, and this is something he also mentioned in the press conference when they asked him about bishop to a4 move. He said that yeah, if I wasn't following my own plan, it's definitely what I would have gone for. But here, just to show you that there are also some other dangers in the position. If for example, if after a4 instead of this, white goes for some other plan, let's say knight to h3 to g5 and such, then there are ideas like knight to b3. In this exact position it doesn't work, but still it could be very dangerous. After pawn captures, now the bishop is still controlling this diagonal, rook goes back, and now after rook to a8, white will be able to defend with perfect play, as I don't know, if something like b5 comes and then rook to a1 becomes a terrible threat, white has this bishop to d1 move and he will eliminate this pawn and then be able to defend. Now let's say b5, now rook to a1 does become a huge threat, as checkmate would very quickly follow, but after bishop captures on b3 it's perfectly fine. Pawn captures, bishop captures, and white will prevail. But okay, just showing you, some poison in the position. After a4, we've said queen b4, the move Carlsen said he missed, and now comes g6. Also, if you go for something like knight to a6, attacking the queen, then the queen has to go back. If you try something like queen to b6, then after captures and captures, this a3 move will now be very, very strong, threatening to open up the position here. It will be very nice for black. So, but not going for that. g6 was played here, and we have rook to d1. At this point, Caruana had 16 minutes on the clock. Carlsen had some 46 minutes on the clock. So, a huge advantage on the clock, as Caruana still has to make 9 more moves to reach time control. Rook to e8 by Carlsen. And interestingly, you can we've shown a couple of very powerful and explosive variations, and it seems to be a very active game. You know, it's not like it's a blockaded position and nothing is going on, which is very strange. Why it was in this position on move 31 that the players agreed to a draw. And you can see that this is something very strange. This is a position where Carlsen is just better. He has a lot to go for, but it seems the pressure was just too much. Okay, I mean, you can simply draw, and you are the favorite in faster time control, so it does make sense for you to draw and better not make any hasty decisions today. But it's very strange. It's move 31. Caruana still has to make 9 more moves to reach time control. He's very low on clock. And there's very little you can do to actually go wrong, but it's a super complicated position, so I guess it kind of does make sense. Everyone was saying, yeah, but what if a draw is a fine decision, because if bishop to d4, it's already, I mean, it's basically already a draw, but not so much. Bishop to d4, I managed to catch an analysis of this move by Sissi. And it seems that Carlsen said that if bishop to d4 was played in the press conference, then he would either capture or decide what to play then. But actually, it seems that knight to d3 is the way to go again. Because now, if you capture it, for example, bishop captures on d3, bishop captures on d4, black keeps the dark square bishop, and after a bishop moves, the bishop moves to c5, black will just be better here with his bishop pair. White didn't achieve anything with this. And if instead, after this knight to d3, you don't capture, you go something like queen to b6, as the queen is undefended on c7, then we have a very nice queen captures on b6, bishop captures on b6, and now after knight to b4, your rook on c2 is under attack, as you can see here. And then after the rook moves, a3 comes, you have to do something, and bishop to b2 will snatch the rook. So a very interesting position where, well, a lot of players were saying that bishop to d4 is excellent and the white equalizes. It would actually be basically a losing move for white. But yeah, I mean, it's a very difficult to grasp this, that they actually agreed to a draw here, as there's so much to play for, but there's too much at stake, and they were simply, I mean, Caruana was of course very satisfied with a draw, as he was worse the entire game basically, and he got caught out of preparation. But this is something that you can really see that what top level chess is today. Basically memorization of supercomputer moves, and then at some point you get out of preparation, then you have to start using your own brain. And it was similar to that in the olden days, where you would read a book and then know a lot of lines, but those lines were also human lines. And here it just feels that there's too big of a difference between playing supercomputer preparation and then after you start using your brain, and then the quality seems to drop dramatically, which is normal. I mean, of course humans cannot follow that play of a supercomputer, but it's just I mean, you don't have like this game where someone starts creating from the start of the game, but rather you have like 25 moves of super preparation, and then the level of play just drops. As I don't think it's the only problem is that of course humans cannot play like computers, but you haven't been playing this game from the start. You just you know, you have a position, and then your opponent plays a move that's completely out of your preparation. Then you have to start thinking, so you have to warm your brain up first. But I'm sure there are, you know, a lot of even books maybe even written about this phenomenon, but seems fairly odd. But okay, I'm basically just rambling on now at this point. This is game 12. They agreed to a draw. Now there will be a rest day, and on Wednesday, that's 2 days from now, we will have playoffs. First, we will have 4 games of rapid. That's 25 minutes for each player with an increment of 10 seconds. And if all those games are drawn, then we go into blitz games. We will have 5 mini matches. So first we have a mini match of 2 games, 2 blitz games, and then if someone wins that match, it's all over. If not, then we have a second mini match of 2 blitz games, third mini match of 2 blitz games, fourth mini match, and fifth match. The blitz games are played with 5 minutes. 5 minutes on the clock, I believe. Sorry, I have this written down somewhere, but I believe it's yeah, 5 minutes plus 3 seconds increment. And if that ends in a draw, then we have a final game, 11th game, that will be Armageddon, where black will get where black will have 4 minutes and white will have 5 minutes on the clock, but white has to win that game. If black draws, then black wins the title of World Chess Champion 2018. So yeah, that's basically it. Really crazy game. I'm sure if it wasn't played in a World Chess Championship match, it would have ended differently. It would have been played differently. You know, Carlsen basically just played a line where he can't lose, and you know, if a chance presented itself, then he would take it, but he will not push for anything, which makes sense. So what do you think about this whole phenomenon and this game, this match? The time formats, the everything, you know, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. I would like to thank Steve Schenken, Michael Ventura, Antti Koponen, Nader Salem, and Samuel Taylor for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, hopefully with some more interesting content. Tomorrow we're gonna check up on some of your own suggestions, and on Wednesday we're back with the playoffs. Thank you all, and I will see you soon.